Good afternoon and welcome to IBA News this Thursday, the 11th of August. I'm Elon Aslan-Levy, joining you live from Jerusalem. Just a short time ago, in what police are describing as a suspected terror attack, an 18-year-old Jewish teenager was stabbed with a screwdriver in his upper body near the Mount of Olives cemetery in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Atul. Police said the man was in a moderate condition and had been evacuated to the Hadassah hospital on Mount Scopus. Security forces are presently combing the area for the Palestinian perpetrator. The Cabinet is meeting at this hour in an effort to pass a preliminary vote approving the government's two-year budget for 2017 and 2018. IBA's political reporter, Kalev Ben-David, is here in the studio with the story. Kalev.
Thanks, Alon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opened today's cabinet meeting by defending the budget proposal that has already spurred work disputes and strike threats in the public sector and fierce denunciation from opposition parties. Netanyahu told his ministers this budget will encourage investment, increase competition, and lower the cost of living. Lower tax rates will increase economic growth that will help fund social spending, the Prime Minister said. Finance Minister Moshe Kachlon asserted that the budget will invest billions of shekels in social welfare, healthcare, and education, and significantly reduce government regulation and bureaucracy. Yair Lapid, head of the opposition Yesh Atid party and Kachlon's predecessor as finance minister, disputed those claims, telling Israel Radio the budget will end up reducing spending for essential needs to the point where it will seriously weaken the very foundations of Israeli society. The proposal will need cabinet approval before heading to the Knesset when it resumes in October and has to win final approval in its second and third readings by early next year or the government would fall. With the threat of further public sector strikes in the coming months, this budget is certain to face a stormy political passage through the autumn and winter. Alon?
Thank you, Kalev. Doctors went ahead with a 24-hour strike nationwide this morning after last-minute talks with the Treasury collapsed overnight. The strike affects all government-run hospitals and psychiatric and geriatric facilities, but doctors at the Hadassah Medical Center were ordered to return to regular operations today at 10 o'clock by the District Labor Court following a petition by the hospital. Doctors will now be on Shabbat footing till tomorrow at 8 a.m., performing only emergency procedures. The Israel Medical Association is demanding that the next budget include up to 2 billion additional shekels for hospital beds and manpower. Meanwhile, Health Minister Yaakov Litzman insists that the strike is redundant, saying he hopes talks will lead to a compromise on budgetary increases. He added, "It's hard not to feel that this strike is motivated by something other than concern for the public good." The IMA is threatening further action if no concessions are made by the end of Tisha B'Av on Sunday. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas reportedly rejected an American request to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. A report in the Palestinian Al-Quds newspaper today said U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry made the request at a meeting with Abbas in Paris last month. The Palestinian president told Kerry that he would only agree to meet Netanyahu after Israel freezes all construction on the West Bank in the settlements and releases Palestinian prisoners who were to have been set free in a goodwill gesture by Israel during the 2014 peace talks. Netanyahu has said several times that he is prepared to meet with Abbas in Jerusalem or Ramallah without preconditions. Both the United States and France have failed to bring about the renewal of negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. In June, France convened world powers to discuss the French peace initiative with the aim of conducting a summit in the presence of Israel and the Palestinians later this year. The Palestinians support the French proposal, but Israel insists the French initiative is doomed to fail. Joining us from moving over to the next story. Just days after Unilever admitted that cereals contaminated with salmonella had reached supermarket shelves, the Hanasir subsidiary of the Shamir Salads company has recalled hummus and trina products after they too were found to be contaminated with salmonella. 15 hours after the health ministry found out about the salmonella, it publicly announced that it was found in some of Shamir's products after samples were taken by ministry inspectors. Shamir today issued a recall for all hummus products and aubergine trina salad with expiration dates ranging from the 1st to 18th of September this year, and all trina products with expiration dates from the 16th of September to the 3rd of October. The company emphasized that salads without hummus or trina, as well as hummus and trina products that do not fall within the designated dates, are safe for consumption. In a related affair, the Health Ministry says it will shut down a factory that supplied unpasteurized camel milk to the Bereshit Milk Company and plans to destroy 4 tons of the milk after 2 children who drank the milk were hospitalized with brucellosis. The ministry is warning the public against consuming any unpasteurized dairy products. Well, now, pardon me. The Jerusalem Municipality's Planning Commission has approved the expropriation of 1.2 dunams of land from the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Jabal Mukaber for the construction of 2 synagogues and a mikveh for the residents of Nof Zion, a Jewish residential neighborhood in the heart of Jabal Mukaber. Peace Now spokeswoman Hagit Ofran told IBA News that Palestinian residents living in East Jerusalem neighborhoods also need parks and public buildings. The Planning Committee's approval is further proof that the municipality of Jerusalem acts only for the good of the city's Jewish residents at the expense of the Palestinian residents living in East Jerusalem neighborhoods, she said. Nof Zion, an apartment complex built on privately owned land purchased by an Israeli developer, held its cornerstone laying ceremony back in 2009. And now joining us from our Tel Aviv studio is Ambassador Danny Danon, Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations. Ambassador, welcome to the studio. Can you hear us? Ambassador, you just led a group of 11 UN ambassadors on an intensive tour of Israel. What was the purpose of this trip? We appear to be having minor technical difficulties. We'll try to come back to the ambassador in due course. American diplomats from the Jerusalem consulate have visited Susia in the South Hebron Hills, where Arab tents and shacks are slated for demolition by the civil administration, which says they were erected without the necessary permissions. The High Court of Justice has rejected a petition against the raising of the structures, which are in Area C and adjacent to the Israeli community of Susia, ruling the 300 Arabs who live there indeed have alternative living solutions. The state has twice before evacuated the Arab Susia, which has been in a land battle with the state since the 1980s. Earlier this week, the civil administration demolished 5 structures financed by the European Union in the village of al-Khair, right next to the Jewish community of Carmel. The US State Department has warned Israel against the move, saying it would be very troubling.
The government proceeds with demolitions in Susia would be very troubling and would have a very damaging impact on the lives of the Palestinians living there, who've already been displaced on other occasions. We continue to be hopeful a positive resolution can be reached that reflects these concerns. Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Back in the studio now is Amotz Asael, senior columnist for the Jerusalem Post, who joins me to discuss some of the stories from this week. Amotz, welcome. The presidents of Russia and Turkey are currently involved in an intensive reconciliation process between their respective states. How can we expect this geopolitical realignment to influence our region?
Well, actually, it's fascinating to follow. What we see here is the power of constraints. The Russians, on the one hand, felt an urgent need to breach the sanctions that have been imposed on them 2 years ago by the West following the annexation of Crimea, and the Turks at the same time, because of the failed coup, have a constraint of mending walls with as many external neighbors as possible. That leads them from Israel to Moscow. These are their constraints. But beyond that, there is also what appears here to be the burgeoning authoritarian triangle that runs from Beijing through Moscow to Ankara now. And this poses to the West a whole big challenge, because these people are now defiantly authoritarian, and
do you see this as part of what's motivating the realignment, an attempt to provide an alternative to Western democracy?
It motivates Putin, no doubt, and he wants to use Putin in order to continue undermining the European Union, which he perceives as a threat to his own imperial designs, because they made the mistake of trying to snatch Ukraine from him, and he understands Ukraine, most Russians do, as part of their sphere, and that is what motivates him in that.
Having said all this, just of our northeast in Syria.
Excuse me, there we go. In Syria, this means that the Russians and the Turks, who are the great sponsors and the patrons of the warring the major warring parties over there will continue sparring. They made no deal of this that we are aware of. However, this rapprochement between them surely makes it easier for them to find ways to come closer to each other and in due course to produce some kind of a new deal for Syria.
Amotz, closer to home, our members of Knesset are not enjoying terribly much rest over the summer recess as they continue to argue over the budget. Where does this stand at the moment, and where can we expect this process to lead?
Well, the government is expected today to pass the budget on the governmental level and then pass it down to the Knesset, which is now in recess, which means, as the process goes every year, that come fall time, the Knesset will continue debating this. And by the time it is legislated, there will be many changes. But several principles are clear. First of all, we have a 2-year budget once again. Secondly, there are some budget cuts. And thirdly, there are some tax cuts. All this is reasonable and understandable. However, when you look closer into the numbers, you have reason to suspect that the government here is gambling with a breaching of the budget in a way that, even in the intermediate term, will prove unaffordable and hastily decided.
Amotz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Alon.
Hopefully now we've fixed some of the technical issues we were having before. Apologies for that. And joining us now from the Tel Aviv studio is Ambassador Danny Danon, Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good to be back in Israel.
Welcome back. You just led a group of 11 UN ambassadors on an intensive tour of Israel. What was the purpose of this trip?
We speak a lot about Hasbara, about PR. I think the most effective tool we have is to bring the ambassadors to Israel. Together with Project Interchange of the American Jewish Committee, we brought 11 ambassadors from different countries for 4 intensive days. We were able to show them the reality that we are facing. We traveled to the south, we saw the threats of Hamas, the tunnels. We flew with helicopters to the north, where we saw the Hezbollah gearing up for the next conflict. And it's very important because every meeting of the Security Council, I speak about Hezbollah. But once the ambassadors stand and actually can see Hezbollah fighters on the border, it will be in their minds forever.
Ambassador, it's certainly important for ambassadors to receive a better understanding of Israel and our complex security challenges, but at the end of the day, they received instructions from their capitals on how to vote, don't they?
No, it is not the case, because I'm an ambassador and I speak with the Prime Minister when we have important issues, and the ambassadors are very influential. Some of them will be Minister of Foreign Affairs in the future, like the Russian minister today was ambassador to the UN a few years ago, or Susan Rice was ambassador to the UN as well. So they are important players, and also today when they see the facts for themselves, I believe that they will understand better. It will not be a knockout. We will have to continue to explain to them, to show them the facts, but it's an important tool, and I intend to bring more ambassadors to Israel.
It's early days, but did you get a sense that the ambassadors are really reconsidering policy preferences in a way that could shape their government's policies?
Yes, I think when you look at the small countries, the ambassadors sometimes decide for themselves what will be the policy. And with the majority of the countries, there is a discussion. And I think that the fact that they were here, they saw the reality, they saw the threats, it will support us. It will not mean that they will vote with us every time we want them, but it will definitely support it.
Ambassador Danon, the Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, recently said that Israel is still considered a pariah state by many countries abroad. You've been more positive about Israel's image, along with the Prime Minister, and say it's improving all the time. What is the reality of the situation?
The reality is that we have to fight, and we can win. About a month ago, I was elected to chair the 6th committee of the UN, the legal committee of the UN. I will be the first Israeli that will chair a committee in the UN. And it was a fight, and it went to a secret ballot vote. And I got the vote of 109 countries that voted for me to be the chairman of the position of the chair of the legal committee. So it shows that we can win. Not everybody is against us, but yes, it's an ongoing battle. We see the Palestinians lying day in and day out, but we can win, and we shouldn't think that everybody is against us.
Ambassador Danon, are you concerned, as some other people are, that after the U.S. election in November, President Obama could support a Security Council resolution that would either condemn Israel for settlement activity or even go far as to try to dictate the terms of a final peace deal?
We hear a lot about this scenario. We have to bear in mind that the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon will finish his term by the end of the year. Same with the American president, and the Palestinians will try to push for a resolution at the Security Council. I speak a lot with my colleague Ambassador Samantha Power. we hear that the US will not change its policy. And I want to remind you that in 2011, there was a resolution condemning the building in Judea and Samaria, and Ambassador Susan Rice applied the veto and stood with Israel. We believe it will be the same also in this coming few months.
Ambassador, Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to visit the UN General Assembly next month. What events are you planning around the General Assembly?
First, we are looking forward to hear the Prime Minister's speech. It is a major event, and this year it will not be during the holidays, so it will be prime time for the UN as well. We're planning a major event with the African heads of states and ambassadors. The Prime Minister had a very, very successful visit in Africa, and we intend to continue to build bridges with Africa. We also brought 3 ambassadors who came last week to Israel, and I think people will look forward to see the innovation and technology of Israel, how we can support and work with the people in Africa.
The Prime Minister has certainly been expanding ties with Africa, which you alluded to, but as the first Israeli ambassador to head a permanent UN committee, how do you see Israel expanding these ties in the UN arena specifically?
My policy is to do more and to show the real face of Israel. That's why my mission, we work very hard, and almost every month we have events that are not connected to the conflict with the Palestinians. It can be about culture, art, technology, innovation, bridges to Africa. I think that is a strategy we need to apply all over the world, because we have a lot to show to the world, and people are curious. When I have secret talks with some of the ambassadors who do not have diplomatic ties with Israel, they tell me, we want to hear more about your technology, about innovation. I think we should use it, and we should do more events on this issue.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your time, and have a safe flight back to New York.
Thank you very much.
The army is investigating why it took almost 24 hours until an unarmed Palestinian man who snuck into Israel from the Gaza Strip was apprehended by security forces. The incident began Tuesday when soldiers monitoring the southern border spotted the man infiltrating Israel. Soldiers dispatched to the site were unable to locate him, and additional forces were deployed to scour the area. Nearby Israeli communities were also alerted. The man was eventually found by security forces hiding near greenhouses yesterday, not far from Netivot, some 10 kilometers from the border. The special envoy of the World Council of Independent Christian Churches to the UN has called on international humanitarian organizations to halt all aid money to Gaza until it can be proven that it is not being squandered by Hamas. NGO Monitor, meanwhile, warns that humanitarian efforts in Gaza are inherently susceptible to extortion and theft by terrorist groups, and calls for humanitarian projects to include vigorous oversight to prevent the illegitimate diversion of funds. A representative of the United Nations Development Programme in Jerusalem says that Wahid Bosch, the engineer who worked for the UN Development Programme in the Gaza Strip and is accused by Israel of using UN resources to assist the Hamas military wing, deserves a fair trial. He added the UN group will continue to fund projects in Gaza.
We are seriously looking at it. We are clearly concerned about it. But what we can tell you as UNDP is that in no way whatsoever UNDP has provided any political group or entity with the ability to influence our decisions and to drive and manipulate our resources that indeed are stemming out of international taxpayers' money.
In archaeological news, rare fragments of colourful frescoes from the Roman era have been unearthed in the biblical town of Tzipori near Nazareth. The fragments were found in the ruins of a monumental building and date back to the 2nd century, when it was the Jewish capital of the Galilee. They include images of a lion, a horned animal, and a man holding a club, which makes them rather unusual, since depicting images was not common at that time due to religious customs. Archaeologists speculate that the building may have been used by pagans living in the town, or else signified an early openness to the Roman world. Tzipori, also known as Sepphoris, is known for its colourful mosaics, some depicting nudes and nymphs, but these were made hundreds of years later. If you're staying up late tonight, keep an eye out for the Perseid Meteor shower, a cascade of falling or shooting stars that is expected to continue into the early hours of Friday morning. The meteors will be visible in dark areas clean of light pollution, such as Mitzpeh Ramon in the Negev. To mark the event, Mitzveh Ramon has set up telescopes with guided explanations, and during the night, city lights will be turned off, allowing members of the public to enjoy the spectacle to its full. In the Timna Park outside Eilat, meanwhile, a giant mobile planetarium has been installed and guided sky tours will take place during the meteor shower. Pop fans across the country will throng to Tel Aviv Hayarkon Park tonight for another star to watch Australian showstopper and singer-songwriter Sia performing as part of her global tour to promote her latest album, This Is Acting. Sia, who landed in Tel Aviv yesterday, is known to shy away from the media, but is recognised for donning stylized wigs and often performing on stage with her back to the audience.
Mediocre success, and I was an alcoholic.
In finance, shares are up on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. The shekel is also up against most major currencies, with the pound dipping to a historic low of under 5 shekels. In weather, temperatures will rise tomorrow and Saturday, becoming unseasonably hot. If you're hitting the beach, beware of very high UV levels during the afternoon and take a hat. And that's it for today. We'll be back again next week. For all those observing Tisha B'Av, we wish you a safe and meaningful fast.